First, we would like to start the screening. Please be seated.
できますか？
ごめんなさい。
ごめんなさいは足りない。はっきり言ってください。
言えない。確率論だから。絶対ということは誰も言えない。絶対。
特務的な感じ。工程の一部が入れないところがある。プールが入る。動物とかのなんか生物とかも今は触っちゃダメって言われてる。川の水とかが触れないと。
ところがこの子どもたちは要素が去年たくさんあった時、3月、4月、5月ほとんど避難していません。そうそう。
どういう日本を作りたい？
放射能がなくて、外で子供が思いっきり遊べて、こう自然のある
福島じゃなくて
世界にいた。
僕たちが変えていかないとダメだと思う。
だんだん変えていってそう。
発信をしてってみんな仲間を増やしていくしかない。 Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan. My name is Peter Langen from Bloomberg News, and I'll be moderating this discussion. I think the film speaks for itself. Without any further comment on that, I'd just like to introduce our speaker today, which, as everyone's aware, is Thommas Ash, the film director of A2 DC. I'm sure all of you have had a chance to look at the paper announcement for the event today, which explains the issues, primarily about the distribution of the film in Japan. So Ian is here today to discuss the latest on that. Before he begins his speech, can I just ask if everyone make sure you turned off or muted your cell phones so that they don't have interruptions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming today and for watching this film. I would also like to thank the FCCJ for holding this press conference. It's actually the second time for this film to be screened here. It was screened last year before the world premiere. I would also like to begin by saying it's a little bit unusual that for a documentary like this, that it's still being screened and that it's still something that's being talked about. I'm sorry that we're talking about it under the circumstances that we're talking about it under, but I'm grateful for the opportunity to use this as an opportunity to talk about some of the issues. I would like to say as well that I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to say, in the sense that I want to make sure that I leave as much time as possible for your questions. And so I'm going to be very brief in my comments, and then hopefully your questions will be able to take us into areas that you want to go into more deeply. I will also say that I've just literally this morning come from a meeting with the distributor of the film, and so I have some news about that as well. First, I would just like to say that this film, it was filmed in 2012 in the autumn for a period of about 4 months until January 2013. And so this is a record of that time in Fukushima. This is not something that is current in that sense. It is a record of what happened almost 2 years ago. The film had the world premiere in Germany in 2013, and it went on to be screened in festivals around the world, and eventually it was given distribution in Japan. And the first private screening that was done in Japan was in the autumn of 2013, and it had a theatrical release in Japan starting in May of last year. That went on to screen in 9 cities around Japan, and then went into a series of private screenings, jishujo in Japanese, and it was screened over 80 times. One of the things that I am also having a little bit of trouble thinking about is exactly what I can talk about. There are some things that in the original contract that I signed for distribution of the film, there is a non-disclosure clause, and so there are some things specifically about the contract that I can't talk about. But suddenly, as probably all of you here know, the HBC screening committee decided in March that they were no longer going to be able to screen the film, and cancellations of the screenings that were taking place in the latter part of March and beyond were all canceled, and any requests for future screenings were also they were responded to by saying that the film was no longer being screened. And so one of the things that was difficult for me and was not resolved until this morning was that although the HBC screening committee decided that they were no longer going to screen the film, they still held the rights to the film. And so I had a lot of people saying to me, why don't you just screen it yourself? But I did not have the rights back to the film, and so I wasn't able to do that. And one of the other issues that I would like to address as well is that with the original agreement that I made with the mothers and the families in the film, I agreed not to release the DVD of the film in Japan and to not put the film on the internet. And the reason for that was because they were concerned, and had a very real and justified concern about their protection of their families. And although they wanted their story to be told, there was a fear that they would face a backlash. And unfortunately that has happened, and there are people in the film that have been the recipients of a backlash, particularly on social media, on Twitter and on Facebook. And so in an attempt to help protect them as much as possible, I agreed not to put the film on the internet. And so we went ahead and did theatrical screenings and these private screenings in hopes that it would be kind of a more controlled way of screening the film. So now we'll specifically address the reasons for the cancellations. And I would like to say that one of the things that I'm slightly concerned about is that this press conference is happening in English. And I think that this is a debate that I hope can happen in English and in the English press, but I also hope that this can happen in the Japanese press and for the Japanese-speaking audience as well. And so one of the concerns that I have is that that people that will be watching this live on the tweetcast, that my hopes is that we can have, that there will remain an accurate record of what was said in Japanese, and I hope that at some point in the future we'll be able to have maybe even some articles written in Japanese about this. So I would also like to preface what I'm about to say by saying that in many ways this is not about U2BC. This is an issue that is not only about this film. This issue about why this film cannot be screened is affecting all kinds of media and press in Japan. And the fact that it is, in my opinion and in the opinion of some of my fellow colleagues, it is becoming more difficult to have these kind of open and honest discussions about different things, including what's happening in Fukushima. It came to our attention in the beginning of this year, in February, that one of the people in the film was essentially a communist. And the group is called Chikakuha. Literally, it's middle poor faction, and I don't know that there's an exact, really good English translation of the group. One of my colleagues suggested that it could be translated as or described as a communist political group whose tactics in the past have included violent confrontations with the authorities. One of the things that I want to be very careful about is to not really talk so much about Chikakuha. I don't really know that much about it, and many of the people that I have spoken to about this problem also do not know very much about it. It's not a group that, to my understanding, has been particularly active in recent history. It has more of a longer 40-year history, and it appears to have been more active 40 years ago. For me, I found out about this issue over social media, and I brought the information to the distributor because A, because I didn't understand fully what was being said, and B, because I thought that it may become a problem, and I thought that it was something that we should begin to discuss, and that we should be prepared to talk about what this meant. What I was not prepared for was, I was not prepared that without any proof, without any attempt really to kind of discover if there was even any veracity to this claim, the screening committee decided they were going to stop screening the film. So basically it took one word, it took the word Chikakuha, or a kind of communist, for this committee to say, we can't be a part of this film anymore. And that for me is problematic on so many levels. One is because the group itself is not named in the film. At that point in time, we still had no proof that the rumor was even true. And although I think that if it came to light to be true, that there was a person in the film that was associated with a group that was historically violent, that that's something that we should talk about, what it doesn't do is it doesn't negate the story of the film. It doesn't negate the fact that there are children in Fukushima whose parents are concerned about their health. And that for me is what this film is about. I would also like to add one more comment, and that is that the clinic that is in the film was also named as having ties to this group. And again, if that's the case, then that's certainly something that I think should be discussed and should be talked about. But again, it's not the point of the film. And this film literally has absolutely no connection to this group whatsoever. One of the unfortunate things that happened next was that it became clear that one of the groups that was holding private screenings of the film was a group called Nazen, which is also apparently connected to the Chikakuha movement. And they were holding screenings as anyone in Japan could do. And the ATBC screening committee was not aware of their political motivations. And so, but by the time we figured out what was happening, they had screened the film several times. One of the accusations was that because they were screening the film, that they had somehow either A, funded the film, or B, that they were using the film to somehow collect money. It's simply not true. It is simply, I have absolutely no connection to this group whatsoever. Every single NPO that screens the film takes a money collection after the film is being screened for a variety of purposes. One would be for Hoyo, for projects to give children a summer camp away from Fukushima, to buy them vegetables from Western Japan, whatever. So the fact that this one single group was collecting money apparently is not any different than any other group. So basically that's sort of the background. I'm sure you probably have lots of questions about that. I will say, as kind of my last comment, that at the meeting this morning with the HBC screening committee, I was able to agree to a contract with them, and I have, as of today, received the rights to film back. And so it is now my hope that I will be working to somehow be able to distribute the film. Probably what that means is through a series of private screenings that we will reestablish a way for groups to screen the film again. And my hope is that we'll be able to do that within the near future. Yeah. So thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Okay, thank you, Ian. I've got one question first before I open the floor. Just to clarify that point, you've gone then to this distributor today, and they have said to you that because one of the people interviewed in your film is a member of this particular communist group, they have dropped the distribution. Is that correct?
Yes. The concern is basically they have a company, and so their concern is that they have employees that they need to protect, and that they're not able to go out on a limb for one single film. One of the things that I want to be very clear is that I'm extremely grateful to this committee, and I'm very grateful that they screened the film, that they took on the film at the beginning, and that they were able to bring the film to cinemas around Japan, and for that I'm very thankful. I am disappointed with the decision that they felt like because of this rumor that they were not able to continue screening the film. That to me disappoints me. But what I don't want to do is I don't want to make them out to be this really bad or evil group of people. They are concerned citizens that also have to run a business. And so one of the things that I would like to highlight here is the atmosphere in Japan, which is causing people to do what I consider to be self-censorship. I do not believe that this is censorship. I do not believe, as some of the rumors said, that the government came in and told them to stop screening the film. And if that is true, there certainly is no proof that I'm aware of. And so I believe this is a case of them making an editorial decision in order to protect their company. And that to me is very unfortunate. It's unfortunate that that it is becoming the case where people are making decisions to self-censor.
Okay, so we'll open the floor to questions then. The procedure here is if you come up to the microphone, identify yourself and the news organization you work for. The news media gets the first questions. If there's time, we can open the floor to anyone else who has questions. So, the floor is open. Sir?
Yes, I'm from the University of Tsukuba, and my name is James Cole, by the way. One thing I wondered, one of the points you brought up, couldn't any film actually be contaminated by some politics? I mean, after all, you could make a film about Mickey Mouse, and one of the actors might be a communist, or maybe in her youth she threw bombs, maybe one of the cartoonists did something bad in the old days. I mean, do you think that these allegations are just being invented by anonymous sources who don't like the film? What is your opinion on this?
You know, unfortunately, one of the ways that a person can be discredited in Japan very easily is to say that they are either ethnically Korean or communist. And so, yes, I do believe that to bring up, you know, the politics of one of the mothers in the film is at the very least, it's missing the point. And for me now to be accused of you know, that I should have known such a thing, well, you know, I didn't. When I interview somebody in a film, I don't ask for their CV, and I don't ask for their political leanings. And, you know, for me, this is one of the things, I was told to be very careful about what I said, and I can find myself editing what I'm saying, and so I apologize for that, because what I don't want is for this to be misunderstood, particularly in Japanese. But the truth is that if there's a communist in the film, so what? That's what I really think. If they've done something wrong, then they need to be tried. But that's not to be in a court of public opinion. So yeah, I do think that, that anybody who can look at a child in Fukushima getting a thyroid examination and say, gee, I wonder where the money that built that clinic came from, is really missing the point. I'm not suggesting that it's not a problem. It is a problem, and it's something that we should discuss, particularly if there's something illegal happening. But it doesn't discredit the film, and it doesn't discredit me, and it doesn't discredit the other mothers that are in the film. And one of the things that I feel very sorry about is that because I've made this film, and because one person in the film is being accused of doing something wrong, all the other mothers in the film are being tainted with that, and that's not fair. Who made the accusation? Well, people, with anonymous icons and, crazy names on Channel 2 and Twitter and Facebook.
So why should anyone believe them?
Why should anyone believe them? Exactly right. But you know what? I'm thankful for this opportunity. Let's talk about it. Let's use this as an opportunity to talk about what's really happening. Let's turn it around and have a debate, because I think this is a debate that's not being had, and it should be had. It should be being had.
I did say in the beginning, those questions go to the news media. I hope that's clear.
Yes, I'm sorry, it's clear. No one else seemed to have a question. My name is Anthony Brown. I'm with the same cast. Disclaimer, I talked with Ian quite a lot when I heard about this issue. First, I want to say that congratulations on getting the rights back. My understanding was that there were complaints that came into the distributor that sort of prompted their cold feet. And I tend to agree with you that it didn't seem justified that they did that. Do you know where the complaints came from? How would you characterize it? My initial impression was that it must have been right-wing groups or some pro-nuclear groups or something like that, but maybe that's not the case.
So one of the things that the HBC screening committee was doing was they were also monitoring the Facebook pages and Twitter accounts of the film, including anything that was being said about the film. And so, in pretty much real time, they were able to look at some of these things. My understanding, so just to clarify your question, I'm not aware of a formal complaint being submitted to the HBC screening committee. What it is, I think, that it was a combination of what we were finding out on Twitter about the accusations, and then some more research that they were doing, where they saw one of their concerns that they said to me, actually, and I would like to point this out as well, is that one of their concerns was that if this escalated and the accusations escalated and the film or me became discredited, they were concerned that the very real purpose of the film would be missed, and so they were concerned that the film was going to be contaminated, and so I don't think they really sort of knew what to do at that point. And for example, one of the ideas that was bounced around, because we debated about it for a couple of days, was, well, what if we just put out a statement which says that we're not connected to the Chupacabra movement, which I did. I put a general disclaimer on the website which distanced myself from anyone using the film for political purposes. But one of the things that they suggested doing was to prevent this group Nazen from holding private screenings of the film. But for me, that would A, just bring attention onto this one group, and B, it would imply that every other screening was something that we were okay with. And to be honest with you, there's a lot of weird groups out there, particularly people that do any kind of political things, And so it would be inaccurate to say that I support every single group that's screening the film. So, for example, when we move on now and hopefully can reestablish the private screenings of the film, my intention is to allow anyone to screen the film. But I'm not going to say, oh, well, this particular group is not going to be able to screen the film. But what I will say is that I'm not connected to any of these groups. And what they choose to do with the film is their own kind of decision, their own point. So if they want to ask me to go to the screening and speak after the film, I'm happy to do that. If they want to prepare their own guests and speak after the film, they're welcome to do that. But what is not okay is, it's not okay to take the film and to use it for your own political gain, and to act as though the film was made for you or made by you, or that you are somehow part of the inner circle of having made the film. And so it does disappoint me that evidently at some of the screenings that were done by certain groups, they presented it as if they were really directly related to the film, when in fact that is not the case.
Walterson, from Switzerland. Well, I'd like to ask a question about the children of Fukushima. After all, that's what the film is all about. Your film was shot about 2 years ago, and you're showing very well the problem that people don't trust what is called science, that they lost complete trust in authorities, and they're completely lost in what they should believe and what they should not believe. 2 years later, has this changed in a way, or is this confusion still absolutely the same?
Thank you for your question. You know, what's changed is that I am finding it more difficult to find people who are willing to speak out, and I am making the follow-up to this film. And one of the things that I struggle with is finding people who are willing to speak out. One of the things that people have asked me is, okay, I will speak to you, but please cover my face, or please change my voice. But it's very difficult to make a film like that. It's different maybe if you're writing a newspaper article. But I have to say, I understand and respect that fear as well. But what I don't understand is why should someone be afraid to say, I'm concerned for my children? You know, because really I think the science is sort of out on this. It's been, 29 years since Chernobyl? We don't know everything that's been happening. We don't know everything. And I think that people say, well, you know, we want proof that these thyroid issues are connected to radiation. Well, the truth is that no one really knows yet. And so what the mothers are saying is that if that's the case, if it's the case that we don't really know, well, then shouldn't we be protecting our children first? And then we can kind of figure out what's happening. But the opposite is happening. Oh, there's no problem, you know, and then 2 years later, oh, actually, 2 years ago, we actually did release a bit more radiation than we thought we did, or than we said we did. So the fact that the mothers have lost the ability to trust what's happening, I think is very justifiable, but also very unfortunate.
Lady.
Just while you're walking up here, please, I'll just add one thing. One of the other things that I have found is that the number of angry people is decreasing, but the angry people that are remaining are angrier.
Hi, and my name is Hannah Sistek. I'm a Swedish freelance journalist. And I'm curious what reactions you have received from the movie, and also from what consequences have been on making this movie in Japan.
Thank you very much. Well, the reactions have been varied. One of the things that I struggle with is that oftentimes the people that come to a screening of this film are already people who, to some degree or another, know about the problem. And so one of the things that I struggle with is how to get people who aren't aware of a problem, who don't know there's a problem, to really care about it. And so sometimes I feel a bit like I'm preaching to the choir in that regard. But I think that the overwhelming reaction has been positive. I think when the film screens abroad, one of the first things that people say is, those women are so brave to have spoken out. And even the reaction in Japan has, for the most part, been supportive, I think. One of the benefits that I have to not really, you know, my reading and writing in Japanese is not so good, and so I can kind of not really sort of pay attention to some of the negative things that are said, and somebody else is sort of looking at the Twitter account and helping me with that, which means that my head isn't filled with a lot of garbage, but there is some stuff that's being said. But one of the things is that I wish would happen is that if you have a problem with the film, I think that's fine. But let's talk about it. You know, come to a screening. Let's have a debate about it. But what I have a problem with is attacking the mothers in the film, for example, particularly anonymously. I think that's a very cowardly reaction.
Sorry.
No.
Jimbo.
Hi, Jimbo, the video news. Maybe I just missed the point. I wasn't quite sure why this committee had to cancel screening. As far as I've heard, someone Netcake wrote something on Twitter or Facebook pointing out to one of the person persons appearing in the film is maybe a member of Chukakuha. Just being a member of Chukakuha once didn't make her criminal or anything. And the committee had to cancel screening just for that. Was there any sort of a explanation as to why, besides having someone on Twitter or Facebook educating, and have they confirmed that accusation that the person is actually a member of this group, Chukakuha, even today? Any further information that you share?
Thank you. Well, it was a combination of three things. One is that it was a rumor that one of the people in the film was Chukakuha. The other one is that the clinic that was, very briefly in the film and not even named, was Chukakuha. And the other was that a group connected to Chukakuha was doing Jishijoy, was doing private screenings. Those together appear, yes, to be enough. But the fact that you still have a question, like how is it possible that is enough to cancel screenings? I share your question. I also don't understand. For me, and I don't mean to speak lightly about this issue, but for me it's more of a PR problem. It's more of a, well, here's what we knew when we knew it. At the time of the filming, we certainly did not know that. Here's what we found out at this point in time, and here's what we know now. I think that's something that we should talk about, and we should make a press release about that. But again, I don't think that it undermines the point of the film, which is this is a group of mothers who are concerned about their children.
Did they know that accusation was factual or not?
Yeah, apparently, and again, I want to be very careful about what I say because I know this is not my field, but yes, apparently there are some connections to this clinic, in Fukushima. And, to me, and again, I want to be very clear, I'm not making an excuse or anything for this group, but what I'm saying is that, yeah, they were one of the first large clinics that was established in Fukushima that was offering independent testing of children and offering results that mothers could believe. The fact that they were able to build a large clinic with that many doctors so quickly, and that their money might have come from a source that was politically involved somewhere, I guess kind of makes sense. I'm not excusing it, but I'm trying to understand it. And so if that group has done something wrong, then that should be investigated, and they should be held accountable. But it doesn't change the work that is being done at that clinic, or the fact that that work needs to be done. Thank you for your questions.
I think the question there, has it been determined that the individual who is supposedly a member of this group is actually a member or was a member of this group?
So one of my colleagues asked me the same question about a month ago, and it was a moment where it was like, he said to me, well, have you talked to her? Have you gone and spoken to her and asked her? And I was like, no. And he's like, well, don't you think you should? And I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And it took somebody to tell me to do it. And it's something that I would be doing if I was making a film, but it hadn't occurred to me. I was sort of getting mixed up with all of the politics of the distribution and didn't know what to do, and these things are happening. And so I went and spoke to her, and she said, she actually asked me, I was filming, I said, can I film you? And she said yes. And so I asked her to please explain to me how we met and her involvement in the film. And then she asked me, Ian, how come the screenings of the film were canceled? And I said, do you not know? And she said, well, I would like to hear it from you. And I said, well, the screenings were canceled because people are saying that you are Chukakuha. And she said, oh, that's what I thought. And I said, is it true? And she said, yes.
Yes.
My name is Eto Takanori, and I am mainly working for internet media. I want to ask you about the economic aspects of your film. How has been the box revenue of the A2BC, And isn't there the possibility that the distributor stops their screening because of the sales were slow, or otherwise, or the sales was great? If the box revenue was great and suddenly the distributor stopped their screening, then that will support your point of view. And otherwise, I guess not.
Thank you. So if I understand your question properly, you would like to know about, basically, if the film was not making any money, then maybe did they just cancel the contract because they had stopped making money? And if the film was making money and they stopped it, then that would support my clause. Right. Well, I don't have the most recent numbers because the film was screening until March. I can tell you that the film was making some money. It also cost money to make and to promote. But screenings were canceled. A number of screenings were canceled, and the film was continuing to receive requests to screen. It's a very small documentary, and so no, we're not talking about a lot of money. But the film was being screened, and there were requests for the film to be screened. And the HBC screening committee was not sort of, the whole point was not about making money. If the point was about making a lot of money, then they wouldn't have taken the film on, because they knew when they took the film on that the DVD release of the film and internet release of the film was not going to be possible. And those are two of the ways that a distribution company would typically make money. And so they took on the film knowing that the film was not going to make a lot of money. But the film was still being screened. And so any suggestion that this was simply, because the film was not making as much money as they had hoped, that they had to stop screening the film is just ridiculous. Any documentary film, the fact that the film is still being screened and that we're still sitting here today after 2 years, I mean, a typical documentary would not be screening for that long. And I'm still receiving requests to screen the film. So, yeah, I don't know what to tell you. I think it would be much easier to sort of understand this problem in terms of economics, but I can assure you that that's not what's happening.
My name is Kyle Cleveland. I'm from Temple University, Japan. It seems that one of the issues here is the association that the film and yourself has somehow been made with you in these political organizations. And so you're kind of guilty by association in their terms and their views. And also that they think that somehow there's both a political threat and maybe a personal safety threat somehow with this group. But I think the underlying issue may be more the issue of whether or not the content of the film is somehow tainted by an association with a group that may have a political agenda that transcends and supersedes the, scientific validity of any of the claims that are being made within the film. So why not take that on more directly, dealing with the claims that are being made and whether or not these are scientifically grounded and therefore not negatively tainted by the presumed association with this political organization.
The scientific grounds of the fears of radiation exposure, do you mean?
Well, the film's making, it's using these various people to make claims about their personal health and whether or not public health is being protected, whether or not the government authorities are doing the appropriate protective actions for those people, and whether or not, their concerns are being addressed. And I don't know if you have really weighed in directly on whether or not you think the claims that they're being made are actually scientifically legitimate, or whether or not those are just their fears that may or may not be true, but also just may be
you know, the very reasonable concerns that people have that they may be affected by this radiation, even if they can't necessarily prove it in the short term. I mean, some of these effects don't come on for years, if not decades, right? But I mean, what I'm trying to get to here is, it seems the fundamental issue here is an issue of credibility, and whether or not the film is somehow tainted by this association with the political group, and therefore the claims that it's being made just can't be trusted, and that people are withdrawing from it because they think the film is therefore so ideologically biased that it's more of a part of a political agenda than something that accurately represents the experience of those people.
Thank you very much. For me, one of the things that I try to do as a documentary filmmaker is I'm trying to document what it is that the people that I'm documenting understand. And so for me, particularly 18 months after the nuclear meltdown, which is when this film began, I wanted to know what was it that these mothers understood? How was it that they were living their lives? And for me, even if, let's say for a moment, for example, one of the scenes, there's a mother that's measuring radiation. And one of the claims that I received was the way that she's measuring radiation is incorrect. And for me, what I was trying to depict in that scene was the fact that there's a mother who doesn't trust the government readings to the degree that she feels that she needs to measure radiation herself. That for me is the story. And so to say, well, she's not measuring the radiation correctly, I think is kind of missing the point. And so for me, I wanted to know what is it that these mothers were thinking, what is it that they were feeling, what is it that they understood. And so for me to try to, at that point, particularly only 18 months after the nuclear meltdown, to try to somehow contextualize what it is scientifically that they were experiencing would have been extremely difficult, if not impossible. And simply by going to A expert or B expert or C expert to give their opinion, that right there is going to tell you, some of my point of view, right? Because depending on, you can ask 10 different scientists what they think, and you will have a range from, oh my gosh, this is terrible, we should evacuate all of Japan, people, to, yeah, no, it's completely fine, there's absolutely no problem whatsoever, nobody's going to be in any kind of danger, everything's fine. Well then, who do you ask? What expert do I put in the film to help understand what's happening?
Why not represent a range of opinions? Why not talk to them all? Make that part of your film.
Yeah, that film should be made. That's not what this film is. This film is a group of a minority group of mothers, and trying to understand what it is that they're believing in. This is a story of one group of women, and not every film can beat all films. And so that film should be made. Yes, let's talk to 10 different experts and see what's happening and see what their opinions are.
The lady here.
Ewa Biegańska from the Midori Foundation from Poland. I have a question. Did any Japanese politician comment on your film or made any actions? I mean, first of all, mainstream politicians. Thank you.
Thank you. Not that I'm aware of. I've had people tell me, oh, you're definitely being watched, you're being followed, your phone is being bugged. I simply, if that is the case, I am not aware of that. I would be surprised even now if I was on anybody's radar, or if this little documentary was on anybody's radar. The quick answer to the question is no. I'm not aware of any comment being made. Is anyone? I mean, that would be great, right? That would be great if there was a politician that made any kind of comment. Because to make a comment about it would mean that these women existed. They would have to admit that they existed.
I sort of have a follow-up from that. I heard that you had some visa problems after the movie. Is that correct? Or have you felt any kind of repercussions or problems after having done it?
Thank you. This issue about my visa is something that I have also heard people talking about. There are things that have happened over the past couple of years, and since I made this film, that have been very difficult for me, including a difficulty in renewing my visa. However, and I would like to make this clear, I have absolutely no proof whatsoever that it has anything to do with the work that I'm doing. And I would like to keep the focus on the children that are in Fukushima. I don't know what else to say about that.
The gentleman, the lady here. Yes, thank you.
Hello, I'm a businessman, a student of journalism. I would like to know if you are aware of any precedents in Japan of a movie being whose screening was cancelled because of anonymous accusations on the internet. Any kind of movie or a similar film movie?
I mean, there are, yes. I don't know about being canceled, but I mean, there are films that they either are politically motivated or they're perceived as being politically motivated films with a political agenda that people find difficult to screen. One of the two famous ones being The Cove from several years ago, and the other one being Unbroken, which is Angelina Jolie's newest film, and David McNeil, who's a member of the club here, has just written an article about that, about the fact that it will probably be very difficult for that film to be screened in Japan. And I think that's very unfortunate because even if you don't agree with the politics of a film, it still needs to be available for people to watch and to debate about, to be part of that debate. And I think it's unfortunate that pressure can be put on particularly on large cinemas, to not screen films. I just think that's something that's an extremely unfortunate condition that we're experiencing now.
The gentleman at the back.
My name is Leon Pohl. I'm a Swiss filmmaker, independent, and first of all, thank you for your incredible work. This film touched me several times, and my question is, there's a music album and it gets censored. That could be a good thing for a music group. When I read on the internet that your movie was cancelled, I had mixed feelings about that. On one hand, I feel sorry for the people who actually want to show this film. On the other hand, especially in a country like Japan, it could be a big chance, because even that reporting could be a good point for you, actually. Thank you.
Thank you. One of the things that people have said to me in the past after screening the film, this is before the cancellations were taking place, we want to help you to screen the film in more places. And I would always say to them, please don't help the film, please help getting the story out of these families. And if the film can be a tool to help get that debate happening and to help sharing that story about the families and children, then I'm happy for that to happen. And so, yes, if this can be an opportunity for us to think about issues of censorship and self-censorship in Japan, particularly about issues related to Fukushima, then I'm happy for that to happen. And so while it's extremely difficult problem to be having, you're right, if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't be sitting here before you today, and we wouldn't have screened the film today. And so again, I would just say that I'm grateful for what the screening community did to bring the film to the point where they brought it to. I'm sorry that they felt they couldn't continue their work. But yes, I'm looking to use this as an opportunity to continue not only screening this film about the families in Fukushima 18 months after the nuclear meltdown, but also in my continuing work and continue continue to document the situation. And so, yes, I hope that this can be just one of many parts of a debate that very, very badly needs to be happening now.
I think we have time for one more question. Patrick.
It's a wrap-up question. Now that you have the rights back to your movie, what are you planning to do?
Thank you. Well, I'm planning on trying to reestablish the private screening process. It's clear to me now that that other distributors that I have spoken to are really not able to take the film on. One distributor that I spoke to said to me if I removed the scenes in question and possibly replaced them with other scenes, that they might be able to think about distributing the film, but I'm not interested in doing that. I would like this film as it is to be able to be screened. And so I will be working with an individual who will help me to reestablish the private screening process. What that means is that it means taking a lot of responsibility on myself. One of the things that I had hoped for when signing with the ATBC screening committee was that if there was a problem at any time in the future, that their lawyers or their team would be able to help me, because I've never distributed a film this widely before. It's unfortunate that when a problem did happen, that they felt they could no longer continue with the film. So now we are looking at distributing the film ourselves. That also means that if in the future there's any problem related to that, that's something that we're going to have to figure out what to do with. But I will tell you that my intention, as I said before, is to allow private screenings of the film to happen by anyone, by any group, of any political affiliation, and that I hope that this will be able to be used as part of the debate about what happened in Fukushima and about what is happening in Fukushima. So I ask you all for your continued support, and I hope that this, again, can be the beginning or can be a continuation of a debate about freedom of press and media in Japan. So thank you very much for this opportunity to be here and to share this story with you. Thank you.